Welcome back to my channel, and for today's review I'm going to be looking at the Crockett Jones Lanark III shoe in brown calf leather. Crockett Jones, the brand that broke my heart twice in the past. See, unless you happen to live in New York City, that is, if you're in the United States, there isn't a way to try this brand on. There are a few stores here and there that carry some inventory, but chances are it's going to be very limited and they're most likely not going to have your size in stock. So your only option is to gather information online, order through the phone, and hope for the best. Like others have pointed out already, their shoes do tend to be more classic, but they still do have some lasts that are very modern looking, so it would be unfair to say that C&J are fuddy-duddy. Their attention to detail and quality control has always been great, and that's not surprising given that they make fewer shoes than a lot of other makers. But to be clear though, I've never received a perfect shoe from Crockett Jones. I think you would have to order from Edward Green or John Lobb if you absolutely required a perfect shoe. But I'm getting off track here. In the past, I've owned both the Connacht and the Harewood II cap-toe models. These were extremely different lasts that they were built on. The Connacht, a bench grade model, was built on the 236 last, which is somewhat long, but it has a very wide waist and a lot of room at the instep. The Harewood II, which was a hand grade model, is quite long but very narrow in the ball, as it's built on the 373 last. What did both of these lasts have in common? They were both a nightmare for my feet, and I could not wear either of these, so I had to sell them off. My true measurement size is an 8.5C, but I wear almost everything in 8D, and occasionally 8.5D. My feet are fairly normal, but the middle portion of my feet, or the waist, is somewhat narrow, while my instep is somewhat high, but not super high. And my ball is about normal, I would say. One of the reasons I own so many Allen Edmonds shoes is because their lasts tend to work really well for my foot shape. I like a narrow heel, a narrow waist, and a roomy or somewhat wide ball area. And I get this combination with a lot of AE lasts, such as the 65 and 201, and I know some of you are totally disagreeing with me on that, and that's fine. But with Crockett Jones and their lasts, finding a fit has proven difficult. After 2 failures with the cap-toe Oxfords, I decided to try a plain-toe Blucher instead with the Lanark III in brown calf. I wanted something that'd be more versatile so that I could wear it a lot. I inquired about the 378 last, and the Birmingham store in England was very helpful in letting me know how this last fits differently than some of their other lasts. Based on what they described, I decided to give it a chance. For me, it's extremely important not to have excess room in the waist, as this can cause me all kinds of pain when walking, because the feet are not getting the proper support they need from the uppers. I've had this problem with the 236 last, and I've noticed that a lot of English lasts in general have this issue. My pair of Cheney shoes, for example, has it also, but that's for another video. One other problem with the Connacht shoe is that I found the single leather sole to be somewhat less forgiving when walking. I wouldn't say painful, but just not as comfortable as what I was used to with Alden or AE. The Harewood II was totally different, but that was a hand grade and in a whole other ballpark than the other shoe. That shoe had a very comfortable insole and outsole. With the Lanark III, it comes with a day-night sole, but also with a double leather midsole and a tall heel stack. I was a little concerned that this might not be comfortable before I purchased them, but all that fear evaporated once I tried them on. They were immediately comfortable. In fact, I almost feel like I'm wearing my Higgins Mill boots, or perhaps a better comparison would be the 9501 by Alden. They remind me a lot of the Alden 9501 in terms of how they feel, fit, everything. I could stand all day in these shoes and not have any issues with comfort. A lot of Crockett Jones shoes are constructed so robustly that they take a lot of time to break in, but interestingly, these did not. They were comfortable right from the beginning. I know Crockett Jones uses a wooden shank rather than steel, but something about the way these are made makes them feel as supportive as Alden, well, at least for me. For those who've never tried the 378 last, it is quite similar to the Alden Berry or the AE 1757. The shape is a little more curved than those lasts, but the fit is very similar. It has a snug heel, a snug waist, and a wide ball, and about average length overall. I would say even a little wider than the Berry and the 1757. Compared to the 9501, you can see that the shape is different, but the overall width is similar. These 9501 shoes are actually a 7.5D US size, so these are actually a half size down from my usual size, which is common for the Berry last. Compared to the Leeds 2.0 shoes on the 511 last, the Lanark is definitely wider and also longer. I get a pretty good fit with the 511, but I do find my left foot is pushing up against the upper a little bit where my pinky is. This doesn't happen to me on both the Berry or the 378. In other words, the 511 is a little more narrow in the ball and presents maybe a sleeker look, although that's debatable. It is a little bit more rounder or blobby looking to some. The Lanark is not what I would describe as a sleek shoe, but then that's not the reason you would buy it anyway. I want to also point out that I think this last would work really well for a lot of men that cannot fit into Allen Edmonds last because they need more instep room. I find this last has a lot of room at the instep. And in my experience, more instep room than the Berry, except you have to factor in that the Berry is a half size smaller than normal. Now, in terms of fit, how should you convert your US size to UK sizing? This can be tricky, and you're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask. In my own subjective view, I have found that going down a full size from your US size is the best fit. Others will recommend a half size down, but if I try to do that, the shoes are way too big. In other words, like I said previously, I am an 8D in Allen Edmonds, so 7E in Crockett Jones is my best fit. Obviously, do what's best for you. Also, be aware that E width in Crockett Jones just means the standard D width. It's a little confusing because other British brands like Loke and Cheney, they'll use F as their standard, which is again D width in US sizing. You can tell just by looking at the fit here that the widest part of the shoe lines up pretty well with the ball, maybe putting it just slightly ahead of the widest part, but this is fine just so long as you have no pinching when you walk. If you compare the stitch density to say Allen Edmonds, you can see it's definitely higher in Crockett Jones. If you've never tried a C&J shoe on, their insoles have a unique feel to them. The heel has a half sock liner just like Alden uses, but the ball area has a sort of fuzzy feel to it. I like it, but it's a little different than Alden, AE, Loke, and Cheney. Also, the lining on the Lanark has a smooth feel to it, which I believe is the same lining they use in their boots. It's not the same fuzzy lining that the Connacht had. If you do order your shoes from England, you might be surprised how fast they can arrive. I ordered 2 of mine from the Birmingham store, and they both arrived in just 3 business days. I honestly was not expecting that to happen, so thank you to the Birmingham store for getting them to me so quickly. Although these could be worn with unlimited combinations, I tend to wear them more casually. Now, what would I say are the negatives of this shoe? Just 3 minor issues. Firstly, the leather. While it is a very good quality calfskin, it does tend to blemish more easily than most of my other shoes. You can see here there are several scuffs, and these just happen from wearing them out a few times to the grocery store. As a result, I have to condition and polish these shoes far more often than most of my other pairs. They are especially vulnerable when I drive, and I somehow manage to always do this to the back of them. So in other words, these are high-maintenance shoes. Secondly, the leather does tend to crease more easily, and it leaves behind some pretty big creases that some may find ugly. It's because there's a lot of volume in the ball area, and I don't think there's really much you can do to prevent this, so just keep it in mind. And the third reason, the laces. It was a little disappointing to find out that the laces they include were not long enough for me to tie them. They also come untied very easily when I was able to get them tied. I immediately had to replace them with something different that were longer. While this is not a major issue, I think they should consider swapping the laces out with something a little bit longer. Some men will want to avoid this shoe at all costs simply because of the day-night. You know who you are. Some men just can't wear it. Fortunately for me, day-night works really well. Also, the Lanark III is a little clunky and heavier than some of the other Crockett & Jones shoes I've tried, so keep that in mind. I have looked everywhere for other versions of this shoe, but there's not many. There is a Lanark II model with a double leather sole that is being sold on this site in Amsterdam. Fortunately, someone bought the last one in my size so I could stop thinking about it for too long. So thank you for whoever did that. There's also a version in brown suede and also black leather, but I have no interest in either of these. If you're already used to buying Alden shoes, these can be purchased at a similar price point or even slightly less if you know where to shop. Crockett & Jones, like Alden, rarely go on sale. I think at the UK prices, they are a very good investment. If you're looking for further discounts, your best bet is probably to check eBay and other similar sites. Every once in a long while, you'll find a site that puts their inventory on clearance, but that's very rare and they tend to sell very fast. How do I generally feel on the quality of Crockett & Jones versus Alden? I find the finishing and quality control a little bit better on C&J. For comfort and support, I would say it's about even. They're both very good, although I have to say that Alden's leather soles are far more comfortable, at least for my feet. I think Crockett & Jones uppers do tend to start off more stiff most of the time, so they take longer to break in usually. But again, I'm speaking more about the cap-toe models that I had previously, as the Lanark didn't really require any break-in. Which brand is better? I honestly don't have an answer because they're both really good shoes of similar quality. Go with whichever brand fits your foot better. Both Crockett & Jones and Alden are at the limit of what I would pay for a pair of shoes, which means I don't buy these often and I'm extremely selective. So overall, I love the Lanark III shoe. It's versatile, highly comfortable, has great support, looks great, and the 378 last is a really good one for people like me that fit well into Allen Edmonds lasts. I'm only knocking off a half star in the rating because of the laces and because the leather gets blemished so easily. But other than that, these are fantastic shoes. Final rating, 4.5 out of 5 stars. But I'm also going to give my experience of working with the Birmingham store 5 stars out of 5. Their service has been super fast and very responsive. I hope you found this helpful, and if you're considering Crockett & Jones shoes, I highly recommend them. Thank you for watching.